Hey everybody, this is Sam, and you're listening to the Deep End podcast, the show that provides you with juicy relationship, sexual, and personal development tips. A podcast for deep thinkers and feelers who love personal growth and want to experience healthy relationships. Having a healthy relationship with yourself and others is one of the most fulfilling things we get to experience as humans. That's why I'm so passionate about going deep and why I have interviewed leading experts in the field. Join me weekly for unfiltered, uncensored, and unedited conversations with the most interesting people I know. I'll meet you in the deep end. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm so excited about today. We have a very special guest. Her name is Bree Inanna on socials from what I've seen, but Bree Taylor. And I didn't even ask you how to pronounce your surname.
Yeah, so it's Taylor Molyneux.
Taylor
Yeah.
Molyneux. Great. Bree Taylor Molyneux. How's that for candid? So, for 25 years, Bree has been immersed in the fields of psychosomatics, trauma, mindset, and adult relationships. Deeply passionate about helping women heal their relationship to their sensuality and eros through embodiment. She also helps feminine women heal their relationships to masculine men. A
Mm.
trauma-informed clinical hypnotherapist and qualified embodiment facilitator, Bree has studied with many world-class relationship specialists, including Michaela Boehm, Gillian Pothier, and John Wineland. An experienced facilitator with a reputation for her grounded, seamless facilitation and potent ritual spaces, Bree is an emerging leader in the field of embodiment and sacred intimacy in Australia. I am so juiced up to have this conversation with you.
That was such a long intro.
It was, but I'm so glad I went through it all because it's really important. Like you've been with John Wineland and Gillian Pothier. That's amazing. I didn't even think I've pronounced her name correctly, but
Mm.
yeah, amazing leaders in the industry. So
Mhm.
incredible. Wow.
Mm.
And yeah, what sparked this conversation was something that I shared on social media around being in a relationship that just because you're in one, it doesn't guarantee your relationship is healthy or thriving. And yeah, we haven't even had any kind of like pre-conversation about this. This is going to be very organic.
Candid. Yeah.
Yeah, and candid, which I love. So, first of all, what inspired you to reach out to me on social media to have talk about this?
Hmm. I guess for me, when I read your post, I felt the frustration of perceptions that someone who's not in relationship is not qualified to be giving relationship advice. And I
Mm,
don't know if that's true, but sometimes I feel that or I hear that from people. I've even had people in ask about others who've come to my workshops, is she in a relationship? And I was like, I don't see how that makes me qualified to be able to give you an embodied experience of
mm,
what I teach. And so for me, it is probably a little bit of a bugbear at times,
mm-hmm.
particularly with my history, that it is a
Yeah.
it is a misunderstanding. Of course,
Yes,
it can be,
it
maybe not in all
is.
cases. Yeah.
So for context, I was at a party and I had this playful moment with some friends and it came up that I am a relationship and intimacy coach and an old friend turned around and said like, is this the post you're talking about? Yeah. He turned around and said, are you in a relationship, Sam? And then I could feel the fire burning in my belly and I was
Mhm.
like, I've come up against this before. And so yeah, like this is a criticism or a challenge that I am faced with being a single coach, but it's not about me today.
Well, it's about both of us on this topic, I think.
Yeah, yeah, right? Like I've sat present to conversations with people who have been in relationships 10, 20 years. I don't have a lived experience of what that might be like and whatnot. But I've been in a relationship with my mother for 34 years almost. I've been in a relationship with my brother for 33 years or 32
Mm.
years. And our relationships have evolved significantly to the point where we no longer, well, I do not allow to be spoken to with raised voices or any kind of
Mm.
aggression, like in a triggered state or projection and all that. I've set some really solid boundaries. And I can also meet them with this embodied sense of maturity and emotional intelligence. And they are my greatest teachers and biggest triggers of any relationship that I experience in this life.
Mm.
So if I can
Yeah.
overcome the resentments and all of the shit that you get when you're in a family, and you're particularly like for me, I've, considered myself the black sheep or whatever. I think it's possible for anybody. But yeah, that was a really hard blow. It was a sting for sure. So what are
Mm.
some of the things that you've experienced, like projections from people around that?
I don't believe I've had as many direct as what you just described. But,
Yeah.
I definitely have heard of people saying to me, oh, I told a friend about your workshop, maybe particularly couples events.
Mm.
And then they inquired further about my relationship status in assessing whether they would want to come.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
Okay.
as opposed to getting on my socials and hearing me talk about relationship challenges or reading one of my posts and seeing if there's resonance there, just making an assumption that if I'm haven't been in partnership, I have been in a 17-year partnership, by the way, but if I'm not in a 17-year partnership now, that makes me unqualified to be teaching, which I just think is complete rubbish from
Mm.
my own history. It's different to yours, but longevity of relationship is not a factor of one, is the only factor of success. There's many, I believe.
Yeah. Yes. So I would love to challenge this because I'd love to challenge this belief system that and this narrative that, you have to be like, for example, football coaches are
Not playing at the
def
top level anymore.
definitely not playing. Some haven't even played.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it just feels like there's this narrative because there are people out there who have worked out of integrity. So I understand it's not
Yeah.
a regulated industry, the coaching industry in particular. You have more of, you've done psychosomatics. You probably have, I don't know what the regulations are with the studies that you've done, but there is a lot more flexibility in the coaching world. Like we're not,
Mm.
yeah. So I hear why people have that resistance. Now, I would love to know from you what are some of you said something about having a successful relationship. I'd love to hear what you think is a successful relationship and how would you define one that potentially is not?
Mm.
That's
Such a
Milo.
great question. That's a big question.
It is a big question, yeah.
Well, from where I teach now, things that come to mind are healthy communication. And that probably would actually be authentic communication is more important than healthy because I thought I had healthy communication in my marriage, but it wasn't. So authentic, let me clarify that. Embodied self-awareness,
Hmm.
self-responsibility, sovereignty within ourselves, and healthy self-intimacy as well, because I don't believe we can have intimacy with someone else and trust with someone else if we haven't cultivated that within ourselves first. So for me, those are all foundations of trust, communication. Sexual intimacy builds on those things. Sensual explorations, embodied explorations, like those are sort of foundations of which everything else starts to build upon, the concrete that's laid on the house and the pillars.
I would love to zoom in on this piece. I love all of that, and I totally resonate and agree.
Is there anything you had that I missed? I'm curious.
Um, compassion. I don't know if you said
Mm.
that. And the act of
Self-awareness, yeah.
yeah, like the act of forgiving,
Mm.
like to be forgiving. Not so much like letting things go and forgiveness, but like just to be more accepting.
Mm.
And with, yeah. just with the compassion piece, it's just more about having an awareness that like the imperfection of being a human, basically. You know, I just have a little cat on my desk that
You
is
do.
very curious with all of my things and is deciding to chill on everything now. So yeah.
Yeah, I love
And
that. Compassion, forgiveness. Yeah.
mm, yeah. And I love the authenticity piece that you shared and how that's very different to um healthy. So I'd love to hear about how would you describe the difference between healthy communication and being authentic?
I guess it's hard to maybe define, but I see them more as an evolution. So from thinking that we're communicating everything that we need to communicate, it could be practical things and everyday things, but there's not tension, there's not conflict. For me, that's still a bit of a surface communication. Whereas authentic communication, I'm referring to things like authentic relating and Damien Bowler's work, I know you're familiar with. For me, a lot of that really landed authentic communication in me at an embodied capacity. And now it's natural to be able to talk about, well, this is what I'm feeling in this moment, or I'm noticing I'm feeling hesitation about sharing this with you, or I'm worried about what's going to happen if I share this with you. And so there's a deeper level of vulnerability that comes with authentic communication in the way that I'm terming it versus just we can get along and we're functional in that second stage relationship level.
Mm,
It's like
mm.
it's that higher third stage, more evolved level of yeah, we're here for love and we're here to really bare our souls to each other and hold each other with compassion and love and witnessing without having to fix each other either.
Yeah. I'm still working on that. I was just having a conversation with a friend and I was like, wow, I'm like trying to problem solve or like unpack and dig deeper and understand, like what can we do here? It's just such an innate like thing that we do, isn't it? The problem solving, the fixing. So, yeah, I feel like you've got something.
Well, I think as women as well, teachers like John talk about, and there's others as well, but he's just one that comes to mind that, we're love-oriented beings as women. And so relationship repair, the desire to fix it because it's uncomfortable, because I'm worried that I'm going to lose you, or there's, like the
Mm,
desire for repair is very real in our nervous systems as well. Irrespective of our attachment dynamics, it's just something that is quite intrinsic for our biological survival as women. So it's usually so out of our awareness why we want repair, I think, and yet it's completely natural for
yeah.
safety.
Yeah, totally. I think I remember, well, I don't think I know I've read somewhere that it's a book called The Female Brain by Louise, can never pronounce her surname, but she talks about how on a primal level, when we were hunters and gatherers,
Mm.
we networked to belong to the tribe. So we can read body language, we can read facial expressions. We have this
Mm.
system built into our nervous system that has this very intelligent way of reading from infancy, baby females can hear the different tones in their parents' voices compared to baby male infants, they or
Well,
or toddlers. They can't differentiate. They can't hear a
mm,
raised voice when they're in the middle of playing. They've got a different hormonal system, a different brain function. It's fascinating.
it
So
is.
we have this as on a very primal level. It makes sense.
I think it's okay to acknowledge that versus, pretending it's not there.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much that people are unaware of that's happening on a primal level, that's happening on a biological level that's outside of our control. So, yeah, that I love that John Wineland speaks about like we're fueled by love. It sounds way more poetic than what I just shared.
He has a way. He has a way with words, John.
He
And you know what I
does.
want to say about him in relation to this topic?
Right.
He hasn't had a long-term successful partnership for many, many years.
That's true.
Hasn't stopped him from being successful, and people look to him.
And Damien wasn't married until just recently, he didn't
Yeah.
have, he's been an industry leader for many years
Mm,
before he was in a marriage or a union of like with Katie. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous sometimes setting these invisible expectations, whether it's cultural, whether it's the community. I don't know. It's just here's an invitation to see things maybe case by case basis. My
Mm,
preference is to feel into things or to assess what's
mm,
right in the moment versus assuming because there's a label or not that it's right or not.
mm.
Mm.
And I agree with all of that. And there was a question that I just had around, it's gone. Yeah, just this piece around the label and whatnot. I think that there was something to do with John not being in a relationship and still having this level of, um, presence in the industry. So you were in a 17-year relationship.
Mm.
When did you start investigating relationship patterns and learning the skills to relate?
Mm. I started during that relationship, but not at the level that I am now.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that was missing for me in that relationship was the shadow work
Mm,
piece that really started to change things for me. And so, talking about layers of real depth in relationship, that relationship never reached the kind of intimate depth that we both wanted because we didn't have the skills.
mm,
And I learned those skills after that relationship ended.
mm,
And now I'm literally constantly obsessed about refining how I show up with my son. I have a teenage son,
mm.
with my close friends, with people in my life at that level, because I've learned if I can't show up consistently with those people, then how am I going to build my skills? So yeah, it's maybe a roundabout way of answering your question, but definitely the last 5 years, I've been very completely deeply immersed in this authentic, embodied world of relating as an evolution to the early, more surface level of polarity that I came across with David Data and, John Gray and some of those things like
Mm.
25 years ago, which are great, but now there's so much more.
John Gray's upgraded. He's got a book now called Beyond Mars and Venus, which is so good because it integrates all of the things that are in the male brain and the female brain books with his
Mm.
earlier book. So
Worth
bad, so much
reading?
fun.
Yeah.
It's great reading, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so there was something that you shared around what you just shared. Oh my God, my brain today. This if you listen to other episodes, I am not like this. Go
It's
on.
the full moon.
It's the full and I'm also Pisces rising, so I'm probably just like la 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 la. Um yeah, there's this piece around you were just sharing about there's this piece around people who have been in long-term committed relationships and haven't done the shadow work. Like the shadow work piece is a really big one,
Mm,
and it's outside of mainstream psychology as well. I when I go in when I well, this is a long time ago, but I just don't recall ever doing any shadow work when I went and got help done. It was through shadow work that I was able to recognize, take responsibility for my shit, my projections, like
same.
yeah. This was the question I was going to ask you. I knew it would come back. So I want to know, and Damien, I just finished his secure course, so I know that this is partially part of my attachment. But um, there's this he did this, I don't know if you saw, but he did this post once where it was like about being securely attached. I'm securely attached, but everybody else is like insecurely attached or something like that, right? Um, my story, my narrative is that I have noticed that because I've done so much work on myself, because I have an acute level of self-awareness, because I am so intimate with myself, I can hear the tone of my breath changing. I can hear the sound of my voice shifting. I can feel the
Mm,
contraction in my body. I notice my heart rate increasing. Like I am inside my everything is happening and I can feel it
mm,
all in the moment. And I notice that not everybody operates with this level of awareness. So I have a story that it's hard for me to feel met in that in
mm.
relationship. So for anyone wondering why I'm single, that is part of the reason because I have that story.
Yeah.
And I also won't settle. Like I need to feel met in that. So what's your experience like with that?
Yeah, I guess there's similarity there. And I loved how you described that. You know, what I heard was you're really in your body, you're attuned to your body, and you're taking responsibility,
Hmm.
I imagine, for your needs as well. And that is something that it is, I guess, in my perspective, we're in like a very small minority of that kind of awareness of how people communicate in relationships.
Hmm.
And most people want it, they just don't even know that it exists yet.
Yes.
I really believe that. Our heart and soul believe everybody wants this level of intimacy. They're just maybe not willing to do the level of work to get the benefits of it straight away or this lifetime.
Oh
So
yeah, it is hard work. I'm just like,
I'm so glad I've done this work though. You know, I'm so
mm,
much, life is so much, my relationship with myself is so much easier, even though there's the pain that comes with the shadow work. There is the contrast, you know, the light and the dark.
mm.
So I'm trying to remember what your exact question was.
It's just more about like how do you feel like because it sounds like you've done a lot of this work on yourself. Do you
Yeah.
notice any kind of
Limiting
did
beliefs.
limiting beliefs? Yeah, limiting beliefs. It's a limiting belief because there are
Mm,
people out there that can meet you in that level of
yeah.
depth. And I'm sure you are surrounded by them because it's what happens naturally when we
Mm,
embody when we're embodied, we naturally attract what is aligned.
yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I actually read a post someone wrote, I think it was this morning, a woman saying something very, very similar that she's not, this is why I'm single and I don't want to settle. And, you know, these are not reasons to ignore desire for relationship. These are reasons to hold ourselves in our sovereignty. And so
Mm,
I've definitely, you know, my last relationship, which was just short of 18 months, that ended last year. That was absolutely the most profound relationship of like high level devotion and love and communication and embodied awareness that I have ever had. And for me, that was the reflection of all the work that I had done to get to the point where I could show up at that level consistently, but also, you know, attract that person who was my match. And
mm,
and yet it is something that I do have, not right now, but I certainly have in the past hit that in myself. You know, where are the men that can meet me in this?
mm,
Because it is seems to be that a lot of women are doing this work. And I know there's men out there doing this work, but it seems like the women are more uh, slightly ahead in terms of the volume. And
mm,
so the men are trying to catch up, which I love. But then some of us are sitting here going, come on, guys. And so working with my own shit around that, like it is okay for me to sit back and wait for the right dynamic and not settle.
mm.
And choosing, like now I'm actively choosing to be single. That was why that relationship ended. It was choosing to basically not settle,
Mm,
even though it was incredibly amazing. It's like
mm.
choosing there is something more here, and I want that, and I'm willing to wait for that.
Yeah.
And that is so that's being being choosing to be single versus accidentally being single, which was the case when my marriage ended, for example,
Oh, yeah.
very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Yeah. Very different. And it's not like, I mean, I'm projecting that. I'm not saying that this is what you're saying, but like what I make that mean is how that hits me is like this active choice to be single. It's not like when I say you, I mean I. It's not like you're holding out for this incredible fantasy kind of like fairy tale relationship. It's like I'm going to return the language to I because this is my experience. I've met myself to this in this level of depth. This is where I want to be seen.
Mm.
This is where I want to be heard, and this is where I want to be felt.
Hmm.
I don't want to have to dilute my expression to meet you
Mm.
somewhere where you can't meet me. And that creates a sense of unfulfillment. And I think that's what I'm getting from what you just shared is that like the unwillingness to settle
Mm.
for a relationship where I might feel unfulfilled. I don't want
It's
to
a
put words in your
common
mouth.
complaint so many
Yeah.
women share, actually.
Yeah, right. Okay. I
You know,
absolutely agree. And I'd love to,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I hear it from so many women.
Mm, yeah.
And there is a lot of projection often in how that's communicated. Um,
Mm,
for me, my personal expansion on that is that there is deep dynamics of sacred union that are important to me.
mm,
And again, not everybody even knows that's a possible option yet.
mm,
And so the commitment and the devotion to self and the devotion to other and the devotion to we that's required for that over time is very high level. If you look at teachers like London Angel Winters and Patrick Pierce, I'm sure you probably know them. They're from the John Wineland ilk of yogic intimacy. They do a practice together every single morning.
wow. What
How is
kind
that
of
for commitment? Embodied practice.
love making? Like morning sex
No,
or
like clothed partner practice where she's revealing her heart and or her truth or her anger to him and he witnesses it.
oh, I've
Yeah,
got full
yeah, I'm getting them
body
too.
chills. Oh,
And that is the level of commitment that is important for me in relationship. So
yeah.
there's those of us who want this, and there's those of us who are willing to work for it, and there's those who just want to go about their lives and just have a half nice relationship, and they're most of my clients.
Yeah.
But in order to teach this, I believe I also need to be able to access that. That's authentic for me, maybe for you too. It's a fucking all in commitment. So we
It's
can't half do this. This level of self-commitment that I heard you describe, imagine that reflected back in someone else.
it's I've had it. I've had a taste of this,
Mm-hmm.
and what it takes for somebody to be able to sit there and bear witness to your projections, to your pain, to your emotions, to your thoughts that are so valid to have, that are not personal at all. What it takes to be able to hold that. Yeah, it's a lot. And I have been met in that in friendship with a man who activated a lot of my father wounds and a lot of insecurities. And like, I was really wobbly. And we'd have conversations every few weeks and they'd be like 3 to 5 hour long chats. And like, there was just a lot of activation in our friendship. And it was beautiful, so beautiful for the moments that I did wobble. I could share that with him and tell him, hey,
Mm.
I'm getting really confused about our friendship right now, and this is what's happening, and it's so fascinating. And he's along the ride with me, looking at my shadows and looking at my shit, and we're just having this objective experience of it while I'm also subjectively experiencing it. And it's just this like, and he's unable to meet me deeper than that, other like deeper than friendship. But the gift that's why I got quite emotional when you shared that, because it's such a gift to have that in relationship.
Mhm.
And I have it with my sisters, I have it with my friends who I lean into. Like we have that kind of level of respect and honor for
Mm.
each other that we can share that. But this is profound. I love that they do that every morning. And so would he also communicate to her the same sort of thing, or is it more of a masculine feminine polarity?
I don't believe so. They're deep practitioners of the polarity piece. They use the
Right.
terms alpha and omega. And
Okay, cool. I'm Greek.
yeah.
I love that.
So from what they've talked about, it's not necessarily both ways. Yeah.
Right.
But I'm not
Yeah.
there, so I can't verify that.
Yeah. Right.
Mm.
That's beautiful. And I do love the teachings. I love the practice of that and what it means for um look, I try to keep things really like non-controversial and non-polarizing sometimes. I can feel myself like tiptoeing around the
Just do it.
eggshells, but biologically speaking, females are way more emotional than males. And so on a biological level, I see the mirror of that with the energetics of masculine and feminine, what the masculine represents and what the feminine represents. And I don't necessarily, I think there was a post that Miroslav, I don't know if you follow him, but he posted something the other day about like, fuck this shit, like, holding so hard on to being, I need to do this because it makes me more masculine. And it's like, I get that. Dogmatic approach can
Mm.
sometimes be really unhealthy. But when I hear things like this and I hear the power of that, like a woman just being heard in her emotions
Witnessed.
and witnessed to just go there in the safety of her
Mhm.
man, there's so much power in that, so much healing in that,
Yeah.
so much love. That's
Hmm.
love.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I had not the level that they have, but I had a good taste of that in my last relationship. We would do practices together every weekend when we spent time together.
Oh,
Because I
wow.
teach those kind of practices. So we would do them together. And the places that we can reach in these
Mm,
moments of shared witnessing or revealing, because it's part of the deepest thing that I teach men and women is men how to witness and women how to reveal.
mm,
It is so profound. It is something I believe most of us yearn for when we take away all the political correctness of what we think we're meant to do or the fears and the vulnerability. Most women ache to be seen in
mm,
that energy in the way that you clearly, your body was saying yes to.
mm.
And most men ache to feel like we nourish them in that. That is what I
Yes.
believe. That is what I've experienced. That is what I teach. Like we are the waterfall when we're
Yeah.
giving them authentically without our shadows, whatever it is, it's life force energy. It's Shakti.
It's very powerful.
Oh
And
yeah.
oh, I loved your post around, I shared this with you earlier around the unshakable man.
Mm.
Um, and I shared that with a client and just the power of that piece in itself and just like the nuances that you spoke to, that was so potent, so potent. And it feels like a
Mm.
huge responsibility in a way for a man to hold that, but also it's an initiation and he will feel more empowered when he does hold
Mm-hmm.
that position because he's
Mm.
fully in his power when he is unshakable.
I think that's what men crave too.
Yeah.
Sometimes men come to me and they say, love that, but also that's a lot. And it's not
Mm,
fair that I have to do all this holding. But then I hear men who are deep in this work who say, you're a fucking man. Do you want it or not? And I just
mm,
love it's like, it is the initiation, as you said. It's like,
yeah.
do you want to be a man or do you want to be a woman or do you want to be in between? And I'm sorry, I don't believe there's an in between. Obviously, in a moment, we could
Yeah.
be somewhere else.
There's an
But
integration,
polarity
but
is
yeah.
about contrast
Yeah.
wherever we are in any moment.
Mm,
And that gift that men give themselves, we bear the benefit of as women. And then we have to do our own piece to give back to them. Something Gillian says that I love is, men give and women give back. We don't
mm,
give, so we receive and then we give back through our bodies.
mm. That's really beautiful. Yeah.
Same dynamic that we're talking about.
Mm. Because as you were saying, like you need polarity, I was like, yeah, you can't have two givers. Like then there's no polarity. And then you just said that.
Kind of gets a bit, it's all the same.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
dance. It is a dance.
the
S-
ultimate cosmic dance, Shiva and
Yeah.
Shakti.
Yeah. So you had a taste of this in that relationship and
Mm,
then it ended.
mm,
And so it's it's a cultivation, isn't it? Right? Like these skills, this presence that you have with yourself and with other,
mm.
it comes through being in relationship with other and sometimes being in relationship with
Self.
self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been even acknowledging to myself that it would be useful for me to deepen my own personal practice at the moment
Mm,
because I go through seasons and cycles of different practices
yeah.
that are relevant for me. And at the moment, one of my big practices is how I'm showing up in the external world. And
Mm,
so there is this duality, though, always of what's happening in my internal world and how do I tend to that and how do I, particularly for me after that relationship,
mm,
it was, he held me so well that I felt such an absence of that it's been coming back into balance in myself so I can be soft in myself without that connection, soft enough to have that polarity inside myself but also available for it in the outside world. And for me,
oh,
that's a personal practice that I have to take responsibility for as a woman if I want to be in a soft, receptive, available body that's attuned,
mm,
that feels good for men and feels good for me. That takes practice of de-armoring and being present and doing the shadow work and lots of things.
okay, I love this because I love where this is going. So you can, so what I'm hearing is that like you have had when in the presence of that previous partner of yours and the softening that you noticed within yourself because he was holding or he was you were feeling held by him and then just the shift of that coming out and the natural sort of hardening in some ways and the active intention of softening and holding yourself in that. What do you notice about people in relationships who are out of balance when it comes to that sort of thing with the hardening and the softening and the polarity between men and women, maybe particularly
Mm.
more women?
Mm. Well, for men, I really notice how it's armoring the heart,
Mm,
but it's almost the same for women, actually. It's just a
mm,
different kind of armoring. Because so many women that I work with and witness in workshops are so, they want to open, they want to let the force of energy or pleasure or softness or vulnerability move through them. But that
mm,
hardening of going to work, looking after the kids, all those things is so, and this was me in my 17-year partnership too. It's all there, it's armored up. So unless we do the work to de-armor it,
mm.
it doesn't just dissolve itself. Sadly, take a
Yeah.
fat burning pill and it goes away. It's not like that. it creates closures in the body. And so what I notice so much is so many women don't even know how to access their own pleasure. They don't know how to actually use their own breath. I'm constantly teaching people how to breathe in workshops, and they just it's
Mm.
so it's so simple as a yogic practice to use breath, and it's so transformative when we apply it in so many areas, whether it's in the bedroom, whether it's just being with ourselves and noticing what we're feeling. And yet it's so hard for so many women,
Mm.
men in a different way. But breath, it's such a great
Mm.
place to start. If anyone's listening and they want to start, just taking a breath and letting the breath move out of the mouth with some sound and feeling what happens in the body. And that softening or that attuning is being aware of the tension that's there, or bringing awareness to something that we want to ease into as opposed to
Mm.
holding more. And there's so many women are holding so much. I see so many women who are single with children, and the world's hard in that
Mm.
dynamic for so many women, And so there's just this natural hammering because they need to be mum and dad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's me in a practical sense, but I've chosen to not beat myself into that container anymore because it does make me feel too armored up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's choosing to do the things we need to do to melt the walls around our heart so we can reveal to ourselves first and then to the people we're in relationship with what our real truth is in the moment. And that is so much harder than it sounds.
So much harder. The reason why you and I connected is because somebody saw some synergy between our posts. I think we were both speaking to the emasculating men, the thing that women do around emasculating men and coming from that hard place and having to overcompensate and
Mm.
all the things because of all the things. But I think that's hard to translate the impact that our joy has on men,
Mm.
the positive impact it has when it's not just about that we need to be happy all the time, by the
Yeah,
way,
so true.
because that's not sustainable and it's not authentic. But I mean more so around like our joy and adoration and love and appreciation for them
Or what they're bringing us.
or what they're bringing us. Yeah.
That's another mistake I see so many women make.
Mm.
They're not appreciating the simple things their men or the men around them are already doing.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why men stop doing it.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to appreciate a man. Take a breath, like smile in whatever way is authentic. Let him feel the joy of what you just gave him. A smile
Yeah.
can be more powerful than a thank you sometimes. And yet
Absolutely.
we've been kind of blackmailed into thinking that we're not allowed to do that because it's sexual or it's manipulation, and it's so
Mm.
not. I
Or
don't
we
believe it is.
just have so much resentment we don't even notice it, right?
I'm not giving him an inch. Oh,
Yeah. And it's a hard place to move from. It is a hard place to move from.
yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what you said earlier around the compassion and the forgiveness.
Mm.
Like to evolve a relationship, whether it's platonic or sexual, I think someone has to go first. Someone has to be willing to lean and say, I'm so sorry, I've been a bitch, or I've been scared, or I'm angry at you. Can we talk about it? Otherwise,
Mm.
everyone just hides behind their armored walls.
Mm. Yeah.
And nothing changes and everyone ends up miserable
Miserable. And accepting that,
for way
not
too
doing,
long.
yeah, accepting it for way too long and not knowing that there is something that you can do about it.
Yeah.
Because we're just like, you need to pick your battles. You need to, you don't say that, don't do that, like I get the whole pick your battles thing sometimes, but I don't comply to that because there is no battle. It's about
No.
being
Yeah,
transparent about what is up, not sweeping shit under the carpet.
it's definitely not a bad answer.
And also, yeah, sharing with authenticity. Like, I love that you shared that earlier around authenticity and health. The relationship is very different. Um, yeah. And as you've developed these skills and cultivated these practices, what have you noticed is significantly different between, like, if we're going to label the word success, right? Like, if we're going to use the word success to define a relationship, what do you notice is different between your past relationships to the relationships you experience now, regardless of whether or not you are in commitment, but just the quality of the relationship?
Mm.
And then I want to ask you what you think successful relationship. Well, you kind of answered it earlier, but
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I think authenticity is a big piece.
Mm,
I have that as you described. I also feel that I have that with all the people who are close to me in my life, male and female, including my 14-year-old son. We have a
mm,
very intimate, not sexual, I mean, emotionally intimate,
yeah.
vulnerable relationship because I'm willing to go there and I'm willing to be with him in it. And
Mm,
so for me, that's a big piece that has changed as I evolved and learned
mm,
to drop my walls and stop pushing people away.
mm,
Suddenly, I could meet people in that, and then I could learn to lean in and be safe in that. And all of a sudden, all the people around me, I expect them to meet me in that too. So if if a conversation's not at that level, I'll speak it.
yeah.
I feel like, is there something else happening? I feel like you're maybe not sharing what's happening for you, or I feel we're a bit disconnected right now, or I miss you.
Mm,
Whatever is true.
mm,
And it doesn't mean it's not without pain.
mm,
I had a good friend, a female friend of mine. Our friendship kind of just ended recently. And there was so much grief in that for me, but it was done authentically. It was communicated vulnerably. And so
yeah.
it's not like there's a sting or there's a hate that might have been there, when I was 14 and I had a fight with a girlfriend or something, that in that immaturity, it's more just like, well, I accept where you're at and we can still love each other and do things differently to how we've done them before. That's how I feel about all my relationships, including my last partner, including my son's father.
Mm,
It's like I can love them
mm,
without them having to change. Doesn't mean I want to spend every second with them, by the way, but I can be honest. I can meet them at the level that they will meet me or invite them deeper.
mm,
And that is a skill. That's what I think is so important for people to understand around this level of conversation. All of these things are skills. We were not born with them. Most of us didn't get them demonstrated by our parents. I've practiced the shit out of these things and made lots of mistakes, and I'm sure you have too.
oh, still do
It's
sometimes.
all exactly. It's not
Yeah.
like I don't make mistakes. It's clunky and so, but it gets easier. It's so much easier now than it ever was because I was willing to make mistakes and willing to grow. And so, so many of these authentic relationships just now they pop up, and I'm like not surprised at the depth that people, my new friends, can meet me in because it's what I expect. I mean, energetically, it's what
Mm,
I'm putting out, but it's what I expect, or it's not a match.
mm,
And that's not pressure, that's just what feels aligned
yeah,
for everyone.
for everyone. I was sitting with a friend a couple of weeks ago at a training that I was in, and somebody's phone, it was just the two of us by the fire. She was in the training, and somebody's phone. So we didn't have like a friendship. It was a building friendship. And I say that because like you're kind of still putting on your good front, and somebody's phone alarm was going off, and I knew the person whose phone was going off. And she's like, "What's that sound? What's that hideous sound?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it is like a really annoying sound." So I picked up the phone. I just noticed it, but I just didn't even think. Turned it off. And then she was like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Was that your phone? I didn't mean to say hideous." I'm like, "It was hideous." And I wonder if we were just that radically honest with each other, where you can just say that and I do not get offended by it. Imagine living in a world like that, where it's not hurtful to be truthful.
Mm.
It's hard to even conceptualize as a human because we have feelings and words do have power and they can hurt and it can be abusive and I get that. But when it's something like that, an opinion, it's just
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Everyone's entitled to them and everyone's entitled to share what's happening for them.
Yeah.
And for me, the shadow work piece is where I started to look at that in myself, where I was making up stories about other people's perspectives versus just welcoming their discomfort or their irritation without making it about me that I did something wrong.
Oh,
Or they
yes.
hate me, or like whatever.
Or like you leave a party and you're like, why did I say that? Or a
Oh,
gathering and
I
you
still
just go,
sometimes do that. Oh, and I'm like, what am I analyzing that for? That's not really very helpful. Maybe I
no.
wasn't fully present in the moment and I didn't speak my full truth. Okay. Still more
Mm,
work to do. It's okay.
mm. Yeah. Yes. I love that.
Self-compassion.
Self-compassion, it's a thing. It's a very nice little antidote to the self-criticism that takes place a lot when you do personal growth work because I think that's the hardest thing about shadow work is like you start to see, you go through the stages, right? And you start to see all the things and you're like, oh God, I'm doing that thing again. And it's uncomfortable and it's hard work to change and
Yeah.
to choose something else, but it's worth it. And the quality of your relationships, I'm sure I asked you this because I remember saying that word quality, and I also remember you actually answering it. Yes, the quality of relationships significantly changes.
Yeah. Well, if it
Yeah.
changes on the inside, it can't not change on the outside. That's what I believe. Everything is a mirror and an energetic reflection.
It's like a richness and an intimacy with life that
Yeah.
enhances. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating to me when you're sitting here telling me this, and I'm almost feeling like I'm speaking to myself because I'm hearing that your relationships are just so rich with depth
Mm.
and so meaningful and successful and true and honest and aligned and compatible in their own unique ways, regardless of what the label of like whether it's platonic or romantic doesn't
Mm.
matter because a
Mm-hmm.
relationship is a relationship. People get confused and think that like if you're teaching about relationships that it's exclusive to a romantic relationship. That's probably the most potent space to do the work. Your romantic partner will reveal those. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear what you
Mm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have mirrors everywhere else in every other relationship. So, yeah, that for me, I'm just hearing like that rings success. It doesn't matter how much time you've been with somebody because like you said, you were with your ex for 17 years and
Yeah.
that didn't really
We had
hold.
fairly healthy communication, but we didn't have authentic communication.
Yes. When there's no conflict, that means that that's a red flag in some ways.
Yeah, I love what you were sharing. And I even want to draw it back to this conversation that we're having. You know,
Mm,
we've not had a conversation more than very brief messages before. And so we're in this depth because we're both willing to go there. And that's possible because there's
yeah.
an alignment or an ease in that. And so for me, and I'm sure it's the same for you, but for me, I can meet someone new and that can happen every single time if I'm available for that.
Mm,
Because these are skills, become habits, become routines, you know.
yeah.
So yeah.
It's funny because I'm feeling like going into some authentic relating expression. I'm noticing that I feel like this has been a really clunky conversation for me personally as a
Mm,
host. Having the cat come in, the distraction, and my brain fog, and just all the things. And I'm noticing myself um, just somewhat judge myself in little moments of this conversation, which has taken my full presence away in little bits.
mm.
And yeah. just love naming those things. I love
Mm.
naming those moments where I experience that, because I just feel, well, nothing can be misinterpreted then. Any blank face or any kind of expression that I had or any kind of clunkiness, it's just like, oh, this is why.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to reflect back that for me, the depth of acknowledging a question's disappeared or being willing to take a pause, that's all real.
Mm,
And so it feels natural and it feels okay. It feels really good for me to be in this with you
mm.
versus it having to be polished and perfect and all those things that my brain can do sometimes too.
Thank you for that
Mm.
reflection. Yeah. Yeah. It's I could totally play tennis with you right now and just share what that like what that stirs up in my body and yada yada. But it's also just like, yeah, it's what I notice is just how much safety I experience when I can share like this, be seen
Mm.
in this, and feel the availability for that, the
Mm.
availability for the human from you is what I'm feeling. So
Mm.
yeah, thank you. So beautiful.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Next level relating.
Next level relating. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Damien. He's been such a great teacher for me with
Me
authentic
too.
relating. Yeah.
Me too. Everyone watching, go and buy one of Damien's courses. He's brilliant.
Yes. Damien Bolaire. He's the first podcast episode I've recorded on this podcast that is on Spotify and all the things. And I feel like I'd love to have another conversation with you about some of the workshops that you do. We were talking about before we jumped on this call around like the difficulty in translating what happens in the room. But I would love to try.
Okay.
I would love to try to ask some questions that I will trust will not fail me on the next podcast, to just dig into some of the things. I mean, if you feel called to, but like, yeah, just I'm so curious about, yeah, the power of your work,
Thank you.
going deeper. Hmm.
Would be a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a delicious
Mm.
conversation, and
Yes.
I will be including all of the links in the show notes and more information where people can find you on the socials and on the internet.
And I love that we didn't know where it was going to go. So.
Yeah, no, just took an organic. I love that about these conversations.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like we need more time. I feel like we could spend a whole day talking about things.
We probably could. Well,
Thank
they're big
you.
topics in this field that we both work, and I think we're both passionate about it from what I hear of you when you teach, and so yeah, it's like there is a
Hmm.
lot. There's a lot, and we're here because we care about it,
Yeah,
and we're living it,
absolutely.
is what I'm hearing from you as much as I know from myself. That's important.
Yeah.
Embodied intimacy.
Embodied intimacy. I love that.
Yeah.
Hmm. Such a great note to leave on. Thank you.
Perfect.
I'll catch you all on the next episode.